speakers who will come on in just a minute and share their slides and tell us their story. Annalisa Peace, I always want to say Annalise because I have a friend named Annalise. I apologize. Annalisa Peace has a master's degree in urban administration from Trinity, and she has over 30 years experience with government and nonprofit organizations in San Antonio. And since 2004, she's been the executive director of the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance, or GEAA to its friends, and we're all friends of that. And it unites 52 organizations throughout a 21-county region in Central and South Texas. And they are behind a plan to protect the Edwards and Trinity aquifers, all the springs that spring from those aquifers, the contributing watersheds, and of course the Texas Hill Country that sustains us all. And tonight, Annalisa is joined by Dr. Ron Green, a member of the Edwards Aquifer Authority Aquifer Science Advisory Panel. Now there's a mouthful. We really appreciate having him. He has a PhD in hydrology and from the University of Arizona. He recently retired as an institute scientist in the Geosciences and Engineering Division at Southwest Research Institute. And he tells me that he's watching birds now. So I've warned him to be careful because that is an addictive thing to do, but we hope we get him hooked on those birds. He's served on the State Board of Nature Conservancy. He currently serves on the boards of the Senator Frank Madla Natural Area and the National Cave and Karst Research Institute. But he told me to please emphasize that he is not a caver. He doesn't go down in there to study them. So Annalisa and Ron are here to tell us more about this wonderful, unique treasure that we call the Edwards Aquifer, and what has been done and what must be done in the future to protect it and the springs and all the other wonderful aspects of it that provide water and habitat to plants and animals that aren't found anywhere else in the world. And of course, a critical resource for all of us human critters that live in the same area as our water, right? So I'm going to now stop my slides and let Dr. He told me to call him Ron, so I'm going to let Ron put his slides up. Dr. Ron.
Yeah, thank you so much to Bear Audubon for having us. I mean, we really love to talk about the aquifer here at GEAA. And for this meeting, I'm really grateful to y'all because we're gonna, Ron is gonna present the presentation that we would have liked to have made to City Council and put out there about the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program. It's very timely because the City Council will be voting on initiatives for the sales tax. So, yeah, I'm like I said, really grateful to y'all for doing this. So, yes, Bear Audubon is one of our member groups. I'm not seeing my slides, but
okay, is everyone seeing the slides? Somebody unmute and tell me. Are you seeing them, Mr. Ron?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hand them over here.
just a second.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I got it. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So if you look, pretty much the colored areas on the map are GEAA service areas, but we also go all the way down to Del Rio. Next. Yeah, and the Texas Commission for Environmental Quality has designated the Edwards Aquifer as the major aquifer in the state most vulnerable to pollution. So when we have one of the most prolific aquifers in the world, but it also makes it incredibly vulnerable to pollution because that water goes in so fast that there is no filtration. And everyone's going to be talking more about this next. Yeah, and so you see some of the large channel flow. This is actually, I believe, the picture with the caver in it is our own Honey Creek cave that we're trying to protect right now. Next. Oh, next. And this rock is pretty amazing, and I think it, you know, we've been told it makes the Edwards Aquifer uniquely prolific. When I go to groups in person, I take this rock with me. They'll say, you know, does the aquifer filter water? Everybody's been taught that our aquifers filter water, but as you can see, if you were to pour some water on that, there is no filtration, and that's how our water's entering the aquifer. Next. Yeah, so we have surface water across the Edwards and Trinity aquifer regions is scarce. A lot of that recharge occurs through the stream beds, which is a continual challenge to us in GEAA, because within our service area, development's happening so rapidly, and we're seeing these streams become polluted, and so as TC calls them, impaired. Next. So yeah, the Edwards is the source of the largest springs in Texas, and if you look at that and see where the major cities originally settled around those springs and the waterways, which is actually on the artesian zone of the Edwards, where it's not vulnerable. And then historically, we didn't have a lot of settlement in the light blue areas, which is the contributing and recharge zones, because there wasn't a lot of surface water and the very sparse soil cover. So it was not really good for agricultural use. So historically, we had settlement patterns that were just naturally protective of the Edwards as a water source, but when we started drilling wells, all that has changed. Next. Yeah, so you see here the where the cities and towns were located. Next. And then we take in and work with the folks down at the basin estuaries, and a lot of the work we have done is to make sure that the water goes from those springs where that originate in the hill country for the most part, and then go all the way down the mainly the San Antonio and Guadalupe watersheds within our region, but some of it in the Nueces watershed as well. And that's really important because it's essential to the wildlife and the economy, actually, of the coast, that we maintain the freshwater and saline water balance in those basin estuaries. So we have spent a lot of time over the years and are still engaged with the coastal communities as well. Next. And then we have all these wonderful endangered and threatened species. These are some of them. These have been really, I guess, the frontline soldiers in allowing us to protect the aquifer, because the Endangered Species Act is one of the strongest tools we have. Now I'm gonna go ahead and toss this over to Ron, and he's gonna take it from here. While he's getting his ready, I'll tell you, this is kind of funny, but we are, when I got involved in water issues, I remember it was in the early 1990s, Texas Monthly did a poll, and it said that 80% of Texans want to retire to the textile country, which we're not there yet, but it seems like a good percentage of them are there now.
Yeah, Annalisa, I've shifted it over, but on my screen, but it's not showing up on
You need to put it on presentation mode.
Well, I did.
Oh, I guess you need to reduce mine because mine's still showing.
Yeah, I know that. I see that.
Sorry about that. Can't help you. There you go. Perfect.
There we go. Okay.
Now, if you put that on presentation, great.
Yep.
Thank
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Edwards. We're going to mostly talk about the contributing zone. And the importance of the contributing zone to the protecting the Edwards Aquifer. It hasn't been given the attention that it deserves, and so that's going to be the main focus of my presentation. I'm going to start off with a number of slides that just have text, so bear with me while we get through those, just so that we establish sort of the some of the fundamentals for the rest of the talk. So just a little bit of the background on the Edwards Aquifer Protection Plan. This, I think many people are familiar with this, but starting back in 2000, the citizens of San Antonio voted 1/8 cent of sales tax to buy sensitive properties over the Edwards, and it was mostly limited to Bexar County. This became and has become an extremely popular program in San Antonio, and it's been approved again in 2005, 2010, 2015 for considerable monies to protect these properties that protect the recharge to the Edwards. And as many of you are aware, the 1/8 cent sales tax that was approved by the citizens in 2015 will be running out in the next year or so. And there is debate over whether to continue use of that 1/8 cent to continue the EAPP or to divert that to other programs, some for VIA, some for education. And that will be apparently posed to the citizens this fall. So I'm going to talk about the technical issues behind this, and then we may get back to, how, the community may be addressing this. So there's a process in place to how to identify the properties for the EAPP. And those properties may be just a purchase of land, or it may be a purchase of a conservation easement that limits the amount of development on the land. The process is the same for both. First, there's a scientific evaluation team. They come up with the criteria on how to value these properties. That is forwarded to a conservation advisory board, who then relies on a land acquisition team to go out and visit the lands and see what is exactly there, and to come back with a report on that property, give it to the CAB, the Conservation Advisory Board, who takes into account all kinds of different information, not only scientific, but the cost of the land, the location of the land. And when they come up with a decision on the property, that's forwarded to the City Council of San Antonio, who makes the final decision, up or down, whether to get those properties into the program. So the scientific evaluation team is comprised of a number of scientific experts. I served on it over the last cycle, the 4th cycle. I presented to them a few times in the earlier cycles on some of the scientific studies that would be of interest and benefit to the CAB while they're making their decisions, and to the SET for coming up with a model. So the SET model is a weighting program. It's going to put greater weight on properties that have a greater value to be incorporated into the EAPP, and lower weight on those that are not going to protect the recharge to the Edwards as much. So you can imagine that there's a lot of information that goes into this, and it has been modified or refined over the 20 years. The land acquisition team, I believe, are comprised of folks at the Edwards Aquifer Authority. They are skilled scientists. They know how to visit lands, look for sensitive features, do a number of things like that. They come back with a recommendation or consideration of the property, and they report that to the CAB. And the CAB is comprised of a number of folks. Sarah has a seat on it, the EAA has a seat on it, SAWS has a seat on it, and others. They take into account, as I mentioned, all this information and eventually make a recommendation to City Council. So then City Council votes on whether to approve the CAB recommendation. Excuse me. And I don't follow this that closely, but I don't believe City Council has ever changed their decision from what was recommended by the CAB, but that I'm not certain of. So here we see where the properties are that have been brought into the EAPP. The purple area is the recharge zone. The area of consideration is that blue line that's above to the north of the recharge zone. Those are the areas that they have traditionally looked at to protect. These are the properties that have been protected. That big green blob just north of in northern Bexar County, north of San Antonio, is Camp Bullis. And you can see it's mostly outside of the recharge zone. The recharge zone is bordered by a light brown line and a dark brown line. And you can see most of these properties in green that are in the EAPP are in the recharge zone. There are a few properties that have been set aside for this program that are outside, but for the most part, they are all inside the recharge zone. So there's a spirited debate going on about the future of the EAPP, and some of the questions that have come up is, has the EAPP done all it was meant to do? Is there more that the EAPP should do? And I'm going to address that and come up with some, at least my perspective on what the answer should be. So here we're going to talk a little bit about how the aquifer and the contributing zone, recharge zone operate. Here's a map similar to what Annalisa put up. And what we have is the contributing zone, the recharge zone, and the confined zone. So how important is protecting the Edwards Aquifer contributing zone to protecting the quality of recharge of the Edwards Aquifer? So you need to be able to answer this if you're going to make a determination on whether to protect the contributing zone. So if the contributing zone is important to protecting the recharge of the Edwards, then if you aren't protecting the contributing zone, then you aren't protecting the Edwards Aquifer. Simple as that. So here is another very common image that we see. This is a cross section that shows the transition from up on the contributing zone through the recharge zone down into the artesian zone where the aquifer is confined. And the reason it's confined is the source of why there are so many flowing wells that led to the placement of San Antonio and all the major municipalities along the Balcones Fault Zone, which is this edge of the plateau of the Edwards Aquifer. So down here we see the lower unit, the Trinity Aquifer. We see the Edwards, and then we see shallower units, and you get this sort of complex geometry where older units that are deeper are higher in elevation than the Edwards. And it's across this transition, the Balcones Fault Zone, that occurs. So why is that? Well, over geologic time, you had this large area, the Edwards Plateau, that was uplifted, and that exposed the carbonate formations that are part of the Edwards Plateau. Okay, well, things are going a little slow here. Sorry. Okay, so we're going to talk about the conventional understanding of how the contributing zone works. So if you have a recharge, which is precipitation falling on the recharge zone, that gets into the subsurface, flows down gradient to the confined zone. Similarly, this is the conventional thought. If you have recharge that occurs or precipitation that occurs on the contributing zone acts like a tin roof. Everything falls on the ground, flows down the creek beds till it gets to the recharge zone and then goes underground. So you can see that if you're looking at the contributing zone this way, it may not be quite as important as some others might think. So if you have recharge or precipitation occurring over both, you know, all the water goes underground in the recharge zone. That is the conventional conceptualization that's been embraced for decades, up to the last 1 or 2 decades. So there is now evidence that this is not how the contributing zone operates. And so I'm going to talk just briefly and give one example, and that's a Helotes Creek watershed. We could spend a lot of time talking about the wealth of evidence that supports this, but we'll keep it at the Helotes Creek watershed. So where is it? Here's Bexar County. We have the Leon Creek watershed. And here's a Helotes Creek watershed as part of the Leon Creek watershed that goes down into Medina River watershed and eventually goes into the San Antonio. So they're all part and parcel. So just looking at a little closer, we have some roads for helping us locate this. Here's I-10, 1604. Here's Highway 16, otherwise known as Bandera Road. And if you drive up 16, there are 3 gas stations here. This is right where you go into the hill country. It's flat here. You get into the hills up in this area. So you go through Helotes Creek watershed and then you come back out. But what's interesting is the faulting along here that is aligned along this color transition is so severe. You have hundreds of feet of offset in this fault that there really is no recharge zone in Helotes Creek watersheds, with the exception of this little parcel here. And the only reason you have this strange shaped thing is because that's a quarry. They've scraped away all the overlying Del Rio clay, exposed the Edwards. Other than that, in the Helotes Creek watershed, there is no Edwards, other than what's on the tops of some of the hills. So when water gets down in the base, it's already on the Trinity. The Edwards has been eroded throughout all these creeks in the Helotes Creek watershed. So about 8 or 10 years ago, maybe longer, I conducted a very short gain loss study, and it shows that water, you know, here's that 3 gas station areas down here, and pardon me, down here. And so if you go up the Helotes Creek watershed, the conditions then are similar to what is encountered just about all the time in Helotes Creek. You have a little bit of water up here. This is right at where Scenic Loop and the stop sign at Menchaca is, and the Madla Park is just off the edge. And you get more and more water. By the time you come down to Highway 16, there's no water in the creek. This is partway down. This is where there's always flowing water. This is flowing water at about 4 CFS. But if you go down here, this is standing on the bridge by Floor Country Store, just north of it, and Elf Hardware is behind you when you stand on the creek. This is what it looks like all the time. There is no flowing water. The only time there's water flowing in this creek is after a big rain event, and you can look at the USGS gauging station that's at the bridge, and you can see there are a few blips that co-align with big storms, but other than that, there is no water in that creek. So Helotes Creek is not an outlier. There are other examples that we could go into sometime, but let me say that there's considerable evidence that there's considerable recharge in the Edwards Aquifer. So just go back, I missed one point I wanted to say here. What you have here is all the recharge that is occurring in the contributing zone. All this water is going underground in the contributing zone before you get to the recharge zone. And you see this elsewhere. You see it at San Geronimo Creek, which is just off the west. You see it elsewhere in Leon Creek to the east. And this happens everywhere. So what it says is this is not a tin roof where water is just falling on the ground, going down the recharge zone, and then recharging the Edwards. And this water that goes into the Trinity, even though that's a unit underneath the Edwards, because of that faulting, the water that goes underground into the Trinity here goes directly into the Edwards. This is where the recharge of the Edwards comes from. So let me move ahead. So this conventional conceptualization has been refined. This is what we think happens. You get some flow down the creek that falls in the contributing zone that does get to the recharge zone, but you also get a lot of infiltration in the contributing zone itself. So this is why you need to give protections to the contributing zone that you give to the recharge zone, because they're both equally important. So this is a refined conceptualization, and this is going to drive the story that I'm making here this evening. So if we look at this cross-section again, I recommend a revision to this, and that's where you have these subsurface channels of flow in the aquifer going from the contributing zone into the recharge zone and the artesian zone or confined zone. You have water going underground. We see that water is going, along Lotus Creek where it's dry, and it is going directly from the Trinity across this faulting into the Edwards. That's what happens there. That's what happens in many places. And so that is a refinement to this map that I would like to see, or to this figure I'd like to see incorporated. So once it gets into the ground, how does the water get from the contributing zone to the Edwards? So we see that we have this underground component when sometimes there's no water flowing in the creek beds. And so what you have is sort of a phenomena that's it's a little easier to explain up on the Edwards Plateau. This happens to be the Devil's River. But what you have is that rain that's falling over geologic time is slightly acidic. And the carbonate rocks that are part of the Edwards and the Trinity are susceptible to dissolution. So you get preferential flow that develops along the river channels up in the Devils. And so you see that you have much more flow in the subsurface. Flow is much easier down here than it is up on the rocks, because you have all this rainwater that is continuously funneled down to the bed of the river channel. And so it develops preferential flow paths along these riverbeds. And there's a lot of evidence to support this. Well, it varies a little bit when you get over to San Antonio, because you have not experienced all the uplift in San Antonio that you have out on the plateau. And there's been some outstanding work that was done by a couple fellows, Chuck Woodruff from Austin, and a guy, Abbott from California. They did this work back in the 70s and 80s, and it is outstanding. And they first identified that these conduits would form in the creeks and the river channels up on the plateau, but they would be in slightly different places down when you get off the plateau and off the edge. This is what we're seeing down here. We're seeing a lot of, this is why we have all this conduit flow in the Edwards Sound in San Antonio and off the contributing zone. But, for the areas where you have the rock exposed, and that would include Helotes Creek, what we see is that these preferential flow paths mimic the surface water drainage, and so you get fast water flow paths that align with these river channels. And there's considerable evidence to support this. So let's go back to the SET model. And the SET model, again, is that weighting model that the scientific evaluation team puts together in order to identify which properties are better set aside by the EAPP than others. And so during the first three sets, the properties of the contributing zone were given little weight. So when they were looking to buy properties or to put easements on properties, they did not give a lot of weight or serious consideration to properties on the contributing zone because it was based on that traditional conceptualization that the contributing zone acts like a tin roof. Okay, but this changed in 2015. The fourth set took over. There were some new folks on it who took into consideration a lot of this recent work that's been done on the contributing zone, showing its importance. And so the set came up with a new weighting. And for the weighting for the contributing zone is based on three things: the watershed basin, which one? You know, is it the Medina? Is it the Guadalupe? Is it the Frio? The distance from the recharge zone up into the contributing zone, and the distance from the river channel. So it takes into account a lot of the science that I just discussed. So the distance from the river channel would be the distance from those preferential flow paths aligned with the channels. And then, you know, there's some concern that, you know, when you get too far up into the contributing zone that it may not be as important. I would like to see this one give less weight because I think that the upper reaches of the contributing zone could be just as important. And then the watershed basins, as you go west, you get farther away from Bexar County and San Antonio. You know, there's a lot of things that happen in between. So the basins closer to San Antonio should be weighted more than those farther away. So we do have an equation. There's always equations. This is the only one you're going to see, but it just takes the weight of those three things and gives some, you know, score to them, and then you give a total weight, and then this would be the composite weight given to properties up in the contributing zone. So there's concern that, you know, that if you open the door and you start protecting the contributing zone, that, you know, the people would try to get the entire contributing zone protected. This is a way to weight some of those properties higher than some of the others. So if you look at the basins out here, those closer to Bexar County are going to give higher weights. And so the set recommended to the EAPP that they put higher weight, greater weight on those properties going up to the contributing zone. The CAB has been reluctant to extend this weighting in the contributing zone. It's been a back and forth kind of debate. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's one that I agree with. So the technical advisors, which is the sets, they make the recommendations, but it's the policymakers who take those recommendations into consideration, and then they make their decision. Now, it may not be the decision the technical advisors like, but this is, I think, a healthy way things should go. And so, as a member of the set, I have not been dissuaded from continuously making the recommendation to the CAB to go north. You know, they have other factors that they're taking into account, so they are moving a little slower than we'd like to see. So, you know, we have these properties here. These are where the properties have been protected, you know, so they're all along the recharge zone. This is the weighting that we've given the rivers, the river basins, and you can see I just highlighted the ones that have a weight of 8, 9, and 10. And if you look, there are those that are closer to Bexar County. So what this weighting says is, well, let's look north rather than buying properties out in Uvalde County and beyond in the recharge zone, that these properties in the contributing zone closer to Bexar County should be given greater consideration, greater weight. And when you put the scores together, maybe start looking up here rather than out in this area. So back, this is the end of my discussion, answering these questions. So, you know, there's a spirited debate on the EAPP. Has the EAPP then always meant to do? My answer is no. Is there more that the EAPP should do? My answer is yes. And it's to go north, not west, and look at those properties in the contributing zone. So if you need contact information, although I've retired as a full-time employee at Southwest Research. I'm working part-time, and I'm utterly failing as a retiree. I keep working more and more each week, so feel free to contact me. So now I'm going to turn it over and go back to Annalisa to finish our presentation.
Yeah, so we have this Edwards Aquifer Protection Program. I work with groups from all over the state and actually in land conservation from all over the nation. This is considered one of the best programs for, you know, basically the concept of paying landowners for the environmental services that they're giving us. They are providing us with clean water. So it's particularly heartbreaking that at this time we've got, it looks like City Council, they've already put pre-K for SA on the ballot for November. That's an 1/8 of a cent. And now they are proposing to put a workforce development and GEAA for the remaining 1/8 of a cent, which means that there will be no funding if both those ballot measures pass. There will be no funding to renew the 1/8 of a cent that's been funding the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program and the Greenway Trails Program, both of which are like model programs and incredibly popular. This last time that we approved it, we also got $10 million for research for the Edwards, which has been amazing because what that's done is fund a lot of research on how we can best protect the Edwards. For example, their Edwards Aquifer Authority and some partners got some funding for something we've wanted to do for years, which is how can you safely put out a fire on the recharge zone. So it's brought all these parties together. The groups that are doing the research meet on a regular basis, so that has just been wonderful as well. So it's particularly heartbreaking to think about losing these two programs. Other areas fund through bonds, and there are green bonds. If we do lose these, that could be something that we go for, which would have to also go on the ballot for voter approval. But we feel like we have asked for this presentation to be made to City Council so that we could have a very full and nuanced discussion on what are the needs of our community. And to date, we really have been pretty much cut out of that discussion. So why is this important? Also, like I said, we're loving the hill country to death. So the hill country that is getting developed right now are those areas in the contributing zone that Ron's talking about are in need of protection. Next. So what we're seeing here is in these hill country areas, this is a little bit dated. I need to update, but this is among the fastest growing areas in the entire nation. We are always in the top 10 with these counties that are out on the contributing zone. Next. So if you look at this, I just love this slide because it's talking about growth patterns. So if you had all the world's population concentrated in, say, how Paris is developed, how people live in Paris versus at the bottom there in Houston, that's a really interesting. So we are like Houston, and that's pretty indicative of how development is going in the contributing zone area that we want to protect as well, where you're having a lot of single family homes spread out. And what we're starting to see actually on the recharge zone and the contributing zone is 6 houses per acre has become pretty standard. Next. So this is, you know, some of the problems we're grappling with is San Antonio had chosen to protect our water resources, and the Edwards is still our primary source of potable water. We chose, instead of regulating, because frankly our water quality ordinances for the city are not that protective compared to Austin's or San Marcos, and the states are even less protective. So we have, you know, this population and urban growth you know, predicted to continue in these environmentally sensitive areas. We have multiple jurisdictions with no coherent plan. For example, you can see no land use powers in the unincorporated areas. So in the contributing zone, there are no jurisdictions that can limit growth. Like, you know, if you're outside of a city, you're at luck on that. And then we also have a lot of infrastructure projects like roadways and all that are encouraging growth in these sensitive areas. Next. So you can skip that one. We do have certain things, you can skip that one. And well, and you know, those are slides of things that are threats to the aquifer right now, given that so much recharges in stream beds. What we're seeing a lot of is permits to discharge sewage effluent from developments into waterways that recharge the Edwards. Next. So yeah, we have some issues with protection, but really our program that we've had for the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program has been an incredibly successful strategy, and we feel that it's one that should be continued. Next. Oh, so I think the message that we need to get out, City Council will be voting either on the 13th or they have to vote by the 17th whether or not to put this, what they're calling the compromise initiative, on the ballot for next November, which is that a block of money would go to workforce development, and then after that it would go to GEAA in perpetuity. So that means for that 8 cents, if both those pass, it would not be available ever for our current programs, the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program and the Greenway Trails. And then we have the other 8 cents, which is pre-K for SA. And there's not been any kind of a robust discussion of looking at what are prioritizing our needs, or are there ways where we could share some of these monies and still have sales tax for the EAPP and the Greenway Trails? So I think we have a very short window of time for anybody who's interested to contact their city council and let them know that they do care about these programs. And if both those ballot initiatives are put on there, in addition to, they've already decided to put pre-K for SA on there, then the only option we have left is to let people know that if all of those ballot initiatives are approved in November, you will essentially be discontinuing the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program and the Greenway Trails Program. So that's it for me. I guess we'll open it up to questions.
Yes, we do have some questions, and I'd like to just start here from the ones that first came out. Let's see. Lovely little comments about being here. We're so glad you're here. I see some questions down here.
Is the city already maxed out on what they can tax? In other words, could they tax another 1/8% for what they're after?
No, they can't. That's actually capped by the state.
Okay. Question here is this land in the EAPP purchased outright, Are these agreements between the city of San Antonio and the landowners?
Some of the lands are purchased outright, fee simple, but I would guess that over time, more and more land is just being protected with conservation easements, because you can protect a lot more land with a conservation easement and achieve the same protection for the aquifers. What was it? There was a second part of that?
The part of the question was those easements. Who is the easement agreement between? Is it the city of San Antonio, or is it the GEAA, or who is it between?
No, it's the city of San Antonio. And then the Edwards Aquifer Authority has been contracted to work with those landowners to make sure that those easements are managed properly to, enhance aquifer recharge.
Okay. And then the next question is, given the continued building development of lands north of San Antonio, out 281 and I-10, based on what you just said, we are building over our water sources contributing area, which in turn goes into the recharge, which in turn limits available H2O. Currently, the Los Moras Springs are running at a low capacity, and they cannot fill the pool at Fort Clark Springs. That was the comment.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. That's actually within our service area, but it's been quite a while since I've been down there. But yeah, we have not, like I said, we're totally underregulated. When I've gone to other areas to attend workshops on karst, people in other karst areas elsewhere in the world are shocked that we allow the degree of development that we do over the source of our water supply.
Okay. The next question is the other reason, I'm scrolling now, the other reason to protect the recharge zone is water quality. How important is this?
It's very important. Annalisa can.
Yeah, it's San Antonio is one of the larger cities in the nation where we have the luxury of, we've always had the luxury of putting those wells into the Edwards and just distributing without requiring pre-treatment. Most cities, a lot of them are using surface water. They don't have water so they have to have treatment. Now, that's going to be a huge problem for San Antonio and San Antonio water systems. I asked the engineers over there once, what would happen if we had a major contamination event in the Edwards? How would you deal with that, because you don't have any pre-treatment? And they said it would be a nightmare because we have all these different wells. And so what they do is they bunch a well in an area that they're going to serve. They distribute that water. They put a little bit of chlorine in it, a little bit of fluoride, and it's good to go. So they said if they had to pre-treat, they would have to have either pre-treatment technology at each of those wellheads, or they would have to build a centralized distribution system. Either way, it would cost billions and billions of dollars. So that's why when we went for this program, that was part of our argument, is we can spend this money later addressing the problems that will come with polluting this water resource, or we can spend the money protecting it. And I think we made the right choice.
Very good. And what days did you say the city was going to vote on whether to put these propositions on the ballot? What was the date we had? What's our deadline for contacting our city council people?
We've been told either August 13th or August 17th.
Okay.
Not sure about that.
Okay, so immediately is the answer.
Yeah, it's really fast.
Okay. Okay, let me see here. There's a couple of more. And here's a comment. It says, council's been led to believe that no more property needs to be protected, that the quantity SAWS permits are protected through 2070. The quality question is clear to people, but I don't think they understand. I don't know how you would respond to that.
I would respond. I think that's absolutely correct. And what I would like to see y'all do is, since you're going to have this presentation on your website, have people copy that link and mail it to their council representatives, because we know for a fact that none of them have seen this presentation.
Well, that is something that we will supply as soon as possible. We will have the recording tonight, and we will have it posted just as soon as our webmaster can get it on and she does a wonderful job, so I'm sure it'll be soon. And this would be a good way to, instead of writing a letter, just direct them to our website, or copy it and send it as an email. And that way, it'd be more likely that they would hear this message and hear the scientific background of why we should protect more. I love what you said. Or do we want to spend money cleaning up later, or do we want to protect it now? And that seems to be a clear choice for me, but we'll let other people make their own decision. It says, please put up your contact information again for both speakers. It was too quick. Okay, so if we can put up, Ron, I stopped your slide. If you can put up your the last slide you had, was yours on there too? Okay, or we can put it on our website.
Yeah, and ours is really easy. If you Google Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance, it pops right up.
Okay.
So,
Okay, what reason was given for not allowing this to be presented at the city council?
We requested for it to be on the agenda for the past year. We were never given a reason. We were just never invited to present.
Okay. Then the other thing is someone from Comal County, City of New Braunfels. How are they impacted, or they need to do, is there anything they can do since they're not in San Antonio?
Yeah, it's very frustrating because we've had these initiatives to conserve land to protect our water supplies in the Edwards region. Travis County, Hayes County has a new bond, but they've done multiple bonds. Bexar County has it. Comal County has never designated any funds, and we have been trying to work with the county commissioners because we believe that people in Comal County actually would like to do this. The land's disappearing really rapidly. So if y'all want to contact me, there's also Comal County Conservation Alliance, one of our member groups, and they are really working on this, on getting lands preserved in Comal County. But our Edwards Aquifer Protection Program does not extend to Comal County.
Okay. Okay, and back to the place where you can find your contact. We will also have that on our website, the Bear Audubon website. So with the movie, we'll have that contact there. Okay, and I think this is the last one. Quantity issue as well as quality. If I don't know what EAHCP, something about
Aquifer habitat protection.
Okay. Okay, it says uncrosses 44% reduction for drought use. That will be expensive, like Vista Ridge includes. I'm not quite sure what this says. I'm not conversant with the topic well enough. But so we're talking about the main issue is its quantity as well as quality for
Yeah, I think what they might be saying is we're limited in withdrawals based on through the Edwards Aquifer Habitat Conservation Plan. The springs at Comal and San Marcos have to be kept flowing at a certain level, and so we are limited in our withdrawals.
Okay, yeah.
And if there's an increase in impervious cover, there may be reduction in drought flow at the springs, which would then reduce the regional permits. And that might get city council's attention because it's so expensive.
Thank you so much for clarifying. Okay, and then the last thing, the last one on the list is how do we stop the high-density urban-owned subdivisions predicted to dump pollution into Honey Creek? You mentioned that. You put a slide up very quickly, and I get emails on that all the time to write a letter
Oh,
and
thank
to
you.
comment. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a Facebook page, Save Honey Creek, and then we have a lot of information on GEAA's webpage on this. Right now, we have notified the state that we will contest their sewage permit. That's pretty much the only thing that we have to work with as far as the state goes of something that we can contest. But we are actually raising money for legal expenses, and so even any little bit to be raised for legal expenses would be incredibly helpful. And you can donate via the GEAA website and just put a notation. It's for Honey Creek, and 100% of that money will go to the Honey Creek. We've been spending money on legal and then on expertise that we will need to make the case to the state and the Office of Administrative Hearings to deny those permits. Yeah, we're going to be working really hard on that because that's such a unique ecosystem, and we feel that if the development goes through as proposed, we will lose that ecosystem.
Okay, well, we thank you so much. There were 66 people who heard your story tonight, and we all have the ability to contact decision makers. And I would like to say that it was amazing to me. I found out through an advocacy class that I took how few people making a personal contact, a letter or an email or something with a personal note to decision makers, it will make a difference. And so we invite everyone, if it's a concern to you, to take action and express yourself. Because if you just sit and wring your hands, it's not going to help very much. And if you are called to donate or whatever to these things, that's up to you. But making your wishes known is very important. So we thank you for coming tonight. We thank everyone, no matter where you come from, whether you're in Bexar, Audubon, or anywhere in the city. If you're concerned about this, we're so glad that you came tonight and bringing this information to us. And if we have other questions, we can channel them to you, and we'll have that information on our website. So we thank you very much, and everyone have a wonderful evening and enjoy the comet. I hear it's available now about 10 o'clock at night if you can stay up that late. Go out and see it. It won't be back for 6,000 years, so we might not want to miss it this time.
You'll miss it on the next round.
You probably won't be here on the next one. So anyway, we wish you all a really wonderful evening, and we thank you so much. And please visit us on Bexar, B-E-X-A-R, Audubon, AUDUBON.org, and visit our website, and we'll have all this information up very shortly. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Good night.
Good night.